Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Builder's Journey on the Club Pod. I'm Nicole, your host and co-creator at Seed Club. This week, I spoke with LG Doucet of The First Mint. The First Mint is a Web3 media brand and leading content source for new and established NFT projects with a focus on sports and entertainment. LG and I met during Seed Club's second accelerator in 2021, right when his community and podcast were exploding in popularity. We spoke about the roller coaster LG has been on with the popularity of NBA TopShot, and as the hype happened, how he has stayed true to his community and purpose. Lots to learn from someone who has been at it for over a year. Enjoy! Hello, welcome, Luke. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Yeah, it's good. I interview people all week, so it's funny to be like on the other side. So yeah. And Nicole, just tell you, on the streets of the NFT world, they call me LG. Just saying, or I refer to myself as LG. But you can call me Luke. That's fine. No problem.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm partial to that name only because my son is Lucan. And so I like, I like the abbreviation. But
we're all pretty wonderful. Every Luke I've met is pretty amazing, honestly. It's very special. So it's a special name.
I believe so as well. Well, thank you for being here. We haven't chatted in a while. I'm super excited to hear what you've been up to, hear the latest, and then also I feel like put the pieces back together because we met when stuff was pretty crazy for you. So we're going to talk about all of that. But before we get into it, would you mind first introducing yourself? Who is LG and what is the First Mint?
There you go. So my real first name is Luke. My middle name is George, so that's where I came up with LG. Just to explain that for a second before I explain like what the First Mint is and how we got started. I've always believed that like if somebody's going to be like some kind of radio host or DJ or like an author, that they should use their first two initials and then their last name, right? Like J.K. Rowling or something like that. And there's a lot of famous authors or even like DJs from way back are like, yo, this is CJ blah blah blah, the Drive at 5. Like I always thought that'd be hilarious. So when I got on social media, especially on Twitter, like pretty early. Like my Twitter account's from like 2008 or 2009. So when I started the Twitter account, I was like, I'll use my like funny name thing. And it's the same name on like Instagram and everywhere else. And then when I decided to start the First Mint, which I'll explain in a second, I was like, oh, you know what I'll finally do? I'll be LG Doucet. Because when I started the podcast, I was like, a few people will listen to this in the NBA TopShot community, and it'll be great. It'll be this fun, like community radio show. Never really thinking that it would get to what it became. So now I'm LG and going to NFT conferences and in DMs and Discords and stuff like that. Like I pop into a new Discord or like a Discord for a new project, and people are like, "Oh shit, LG's here," and I'm like, "Yes."
LG
I am LG. Hello. Like never been called that. But now even, we do a lot of the like Twitter spaces and shows with my brother and he calls me LG on the air. And even there's times where like my mom like calls me LG sometimes. So it's like hilarious. And like my barber is like, yo, what's up LG? Like people just think the name is like so funny and endearing that it is I am LG and LG is me. So the First Mint right now, I like to look at ourselves as like a Web3 media brand. And where we started was in very early January 2021, which is not that long ago, but obviously in the space of NFTs and crypto, in terms of the mainstream adoption is very far back. And I'd been poking around NFTs for about 6 months at that point, kind of like just learning about different projects. I have a background in like brand marketing, agencies, production. So finding NFTs for me, having kind of understood crypto for a while was like, I realized I was like, this is where brands will come and that's where consumers will come, right? And probably in the opposite order. And that's what kind of sparked my interest because I was like, this is a place in crypto where people are going to be able to have fun and there's images and there's brand. So I hovered for a long time, collected a lot of different projects, hung out in different communities, just tried to meet people, like tweeted at like all the Axie Infinity people for a while, like just tried to get involved. And I started one day to post like a lot of statistics about TopShot because, if you've been in the NFT game for a little bit, then you know that last winter, like in Q1 2021, like TopShot was it, man. Like there was no apes or anything like that back then. It was like TopShot became like such a huge thing, right? Like there was a point, I think in February last year, where TopShot broke $50 million secondary sales all time. And that had eclipsed the previous record, which was $30 million, held by CryptoKitties, which now $50 million on secondary is like, that's nothing, man. That's what like Apes does in a week, right? So at the time, the way TopShot emerged was pretty significant. And early in that emergence, I started to post stuff on Twitter of like, hey, like these NFTs are moving and you should buy LeBron James. And like, here's some statistics. And I started to get like tons of questions. So I was like, great, I'll just make like a little show. I'll finally use my God-given voice. For people have been like, you got to do a podcast or something. You should be on the radio. And I'd never really done anything. I was like, great, I'll just make a show. Maybe a couple guys in the TopShot Discord will listen to it. And immediately that show became like a source of information for newcomers, which through January, there were several different instances where it kind of TopShot got out to all like the sports gamblers, card collectors, like that whole sector of people who are used to spending big on gambles in a way, right? Because even people coming from the card collecting world, it's like them spending $5,000 on like a Babe Ruth card is like, that's nothing, right? So they're used to that, which kind of led to TopShot reaching the heights that it did. So I created this podcast, and we were very successful. We had a lot of support from the community. We were very recommended by people to the point where we charted on like the basketball iTunes chart for like a couple months. Like we're in the top 10 for a while with like people that are like famous NBA commentators, which was insane to be there with them. And it was a wonderful experience. And what we've done since then is, as TopShot cooled and people got into other NFTs, the immediate reaction would have been to like pivot and be like, okay, dump TopShot, let's talk about apes, because everybody has profile photos now. And rather than do that, we realized that a lot of people in our community were not really ready to make that leap. Like MetaMask was still a little bit of a challenge for people, and they weren't really ready to move away from their kind of fiat system of, TopShot with normal numbers. So what we started doing was we created online experiences, and we created an event called First Mint Fest, which ran in August, which was this like 3-day digital festival of like you come into the Discord only exists for a couple days, you hang out, secret channels, like all this crazy shit's happening. Jess from C Club was one of the speakers for us, which was fantastic. And, it was kind of like this like intro to NFTs for people that was free for people to attend, which was a lot of fun. And we had a tremendous time, and that kind of sparked for us that, perhaps as a business line for First Mint, we could be a place where larger IP NFT projects come and launch to our community, heavily vetted, of course. We want projects that are great, that people are going to love, but that may be a way for us to make some partnership revenue as well, right? By kind of honing in that experience. So in terms of like what the First Mint is today, so it's a really extended answer, Nicole. So you probably thought I'd answer in like 30 seconds. I'll give you the whole life story. Basically, what we've come to today, about a year and a half later, is to be like a Web3 media brand where we cover like sports and collectibles and comic book projects, and then also work with some of those big brands that are coming into the space to help them strategize and also present them to our community as great projects to invest in.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And no, the context is really helpful. I'm going to share back a couple pieces because I think that there's like some givens at the same time. For some people, January 2021 was eons ago, and we have a lot of new folks who are coming into this space. So I'm going to sort of share back, I think, both to make sure that I'm correct, but then also I think hopefully this will be good context. So yeah, I think we saw NBA TopShot kind of come right on top of, or sort of following a lot of the GameStop movement and whatnot. And so I think it sort of rode that same hype wave. And correct me if I'm wrong, but with NBA TopShot, it was you could enter into it and buy a collectible or interact in ways that were fiat also. Is that true? Like
it was all fiat. It was all fiat. There was no ETH. Flow hadn't really reached, like they only launched Flow in September 2020 with like a really heavy pre-sale list and like staking. So there was no like Flow mainnet. There's nowhere you could really buy too much Flow at the time. So TopShot was not traded in Flow. It was traded in USD, which was a great gateway for new people. Right. Because then it was like they came in and it's like, oh, new product. This sounds really cool. Get it on the pack drop, swipe your credit card, open a pack, and congrats. You pulled, a Steph Curry or Kevin Durant. And at the time, there wasn't a huge amount of supply. So people were paying like $10-20 a pack, and pulling NFTs that
Right.
are worth like $100 or $200, which in the larger sense of NFT gains is not necessarily huge. But for a lot of people who didn't even know what NFTs were, it was like, oh wow, like I just 10x this pack, like that's cool, and I like basketball.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Well, no, and it has that same, I mean, I was a baseball card collector as a young child. And,
Cool,
you know, we all remember like tearing into that like cellophane and just like seeing who's in there. So I think that like it makes a ton of sense that like that jump happened, that like, there was kind of all of this sort of hive mind around returns and sort of gaming these systems. And then like on top of that, like being able to, like you said, sort of rip into a pack and see what's in there and see what your return is. And I think like the reason I asked about fiat was that I think on top of that, the sort of fiat first or fiat only seems really key, and something I'm curious to explore a little bit, and maybe we'll revisit as far as your community specifically. So if I have my timing right, you came into Seed Club pretty much right as this all was exploding. I remember meeting you at the very beginning, and then things got super crazy as the second cohort progressed. And so what I'd love to understand is, you know, what that wave felt like, and then what some of those actions were as things were subsiding, and, you know, and as the cohort was ending. Like, how did you, you know, sort of once you were able to peek your head out and look around, how did you decide what was next?
Totally. So yeah, that was a pretty tumultuous time, because it's also like, you have to understand from my personal perspective is that, you know, I was out of work due to the pandemic. Not fully out of work, but I was working in film production, commercial film production. And, you know, our little studio had been hit by a sledgehammer when all the big brands we were working with cut their marketing budgets. So that summer of 2020 for me was like, okay, like, is this the time to make a big career shift, to look at other stuff? And I had been early to social media in like 2009 and had done a lot of brand work then. So when I started learning about NFTs and Web3, I was like, oh, this could be the next thing. It just won't happen for a while. And even when I, you know, so I was kind of taking my time and really much still now, but then especially trying to be a student of the game, so to speak, right? Because a lot of great people have been in it for a while, including Seed Club, that I was like, I have a lot to learn here. And when I started First Mint, it was very much like, I'm just putting something out there that over years will build. I didn't intend it that like within a month we would have, each episode would be getting like 10,000 downloads, you know what I mean? And I'd get like 50 DMs an hour, right? So it went from like, it's fun and, oh, this is getting some action, to holy shit, this is consuming every day, all day. To a point where it's like, I'm not sleeping. I'm on this like crazy trippy ride right now, and I just can't. I'm just hanging on, but it's fun. I'm having fun. At least I know that this is fun, and everybody's making money like crazy. And I didn't expect this. So that's around when I was in Seed Club, right? Because even getting into the second cohort, I was like, I understood enough about crypto to be like, yes, like we should tokenize our community. Like that'll be really cool to do that. And even originally I had in the mind that I was like, what if we created a social token for the entire TopShot community where we get all the creators on it, right? So I had a variety of different ideas of what we could become in a more tokenized environment once we, you know, I wanted to build a media company that is Web3, that isn't just traditional Web2, right? So we had a lot of ideas like that. And Seed Club was so valuable to me, mainly from like a reassurance standpoint, just to be able to tune in like once or twice a week and just listen to like, first of all, like people go over things like legal and chat with other people about what they're doing with their community marketing, have them ask me questions. Let me ask them questions and just learn what other people's challenges are and what their successes are. Was really fascinating because our community like exploded, but we weren't like a slow burn into the community. It just happened. Just suddenly it was like, guess what? Your Twitter has, 40,000 followers after a couple weeks. And it was just like, that was really challenging. Where I was like, we never actually got to go through those like early incubation stages of like, here's how to slowly build and identify, who your true like believers are and the people that want to help you grow this. We were just suddenly at this very enviable point for sure. But we never got to do those like kind of like a long incubation period of like, we're slowly building our mission here. We were just there.
Building these like deep relationships with a core group of 20 people that you know are going to be
Exactly.
there. It was
Like
just like
who to
you have
trust, right?
40,000
Yeah.
people.
That's it. It's like who to know, who to trust, who to know that who's going to stick around long term, right? And
Yeah, yeah, that's a
that's
good
where it ended
point.
up going, especially Top Shot, due to oversupply, and it really cratered. And also people discovered other NFTs, which is great. You can ask a lot of people who are like ape holders now from day one. They started Top Shot months before that, right? Like there's a lot of like Top Shot is this kind of like early kind of barrier for a lot of people from the class of 2021, and so were we. Like they were like, yeah, I used to listen to First Mint, which was great, but come later, a lot of people left, a lot of people were disgruntled. So come like April or May, especially once the cohort ended, I think a lot of those lessons were valuable because then it was like, okay, the overwhelming part's kind of cooling now. What are we actually going to do with our Seed Club knowledge, and also to really kind of like harness our community, right? Because I still believed in that. I was like, despite we have all these followers, people going nuts, I was like, we have like a core group of people who really are going to believe in what we're doing, so long as we explain it to them properly, and who want to join that. So what ended up happening, Nicole, is that we settled on doing an NFT mint, right?
Hmm.
And only selling 500 of them, only releasing 500 of them,
Hmm.
primarily to bring in, be like, okay, we've been doing this, we've been through thick and thin at this point, because we launched our NFT in July 2021. So after Top Shot had done this and then back down, it was like, who's still around? Who really loves listening to me and my brother Phil? And who loves like our whole, who really digs our vibe? Who are the guys that when we do Twitter Spaces, they join every time and they want to say something, and we're having a good time, and they're like a funny character in our community. Who are those hardcores, and how do we kind of bring them in? Right. So what we did is we did a really, really, really simple NFT drop. We sold 500 editions. We worked tooth and nail to be able to sell them on fiat and in ETH, which
Yeah.
was not as easy as it probably is today. So we actually dropped on two separate
It's
platforms at the
still
same
not that
time.
easy.
Not very easy. It was a pain, and it still is. So we wanted everybody who has ETH to do it, but we also wanted all our credit card crowd, who
Yeah.
haven't done many of their NFTs, to be able to buy as well. And then what that NFT gave you, was really just basically like access to our Discord, which is again small but super powerful. Now we're a really tight knit group of people, who collect NFTs together now. And also we sent everybody a T-shirt of our old logo. We had an original logo, so everybody got a T-shirt at their house. But very simple. You know what I mean? No over promising. No,
Yeah.
like this is a zero point 0.5 Dutch or 2.5 ETH Dutch auction with all this crazy shit's going to happen to you in the future. It's like, no, listen. If you like what we're all about, you like that mission, well, I want to talk to you every day. I want to see you in the Discord, and I want you to become like one of my true like crypto friends, I'd say it so far, like mission accomplished. We have a tight knit group in there. We work with a lot of different brands and projects, so we've been able to get them like a pre-sale list or allow list on a lot of those projects. So a lot of people have done incredibly well or gotten in early on some really fantastic projects. So they've definitely like, there's been like utility in a way, which a lot of
Hmm.
people crave. But that's where we kind of landed at that initial like 3 to 6 months during the cohort. And after is like, we did the cohort while we're like super overwhelmed, but then I think it
Yeah.
really gave us the tools to be like, okay, if we're starting, we have a lot has happened, and Top Shot's super contentious. We want to expand into other NFTs. We want to introduce people to new NFTs. We want to speak more broadly. If we're starting from scratch from a community standpoint, what do you do? And that's what we built out, was that
Hmm.
mechanism.
I'm super curious. So yeah, you mentioned and you touched on the fact that you did your release as both fiat and ETH
Yeah.
friendly and accessible. And I know you used Bitsky at the time, and then you mentioned the T-shirt as well. And I think there's a couple of like really interesting, like you said, like it all sounds so easy. Of like just you just like you can pay with ETH or you can pay with a credit card, and it's fine. And then you just ship a T-shirt to the wallet. And I think as somebody who has explored all of those possibilities with various projects, I know that none of those pieces are easy. So I have two questions related to this. One, can you talk a little bit about how you made that happen, both the purchasing in dual currencies, and then also actually getting T-shirts to people? And then I would love to talk also about like onboarding some of those fiat folks into more like Web3 models. But first, let's just talk about the mechanics of how did you go about doing it?
Sure. I'm a very hands-on individual, a very manual person, DIY, which is trying to build a startup is actually detrimental, but because I end up trying to do a lot of things on my own. which is hard to scale with.
Yeah.
First, before I get into that, I do want to, and I think you wanted to ask me about like who our team is. It's a good time to mention Ashley Carter, who's our chief of ops, who I've known personally, has been a friend for a really long time, for 15 years. And she was one of the first calls I made when I started the First Mint. She's got a great experience in ops and in content and everything. So everything I've done here wouldn't be able to do without her. And especially when it came to like t-shirt sourcing and that kind of stuff, it's just like the kind of stuff that is like I have no clue about. And she's the kind of person who's like, great, like here's like 10 vendors I know that we could call right now, right? So really great, having that kind of partner. And so when it came to actually selling the NFTs, what we did is first I'll chat about the t-shirt part second. I'll chat about the ETH fiat split first. So we worked really closely with Bitsky to create like essentially like a custom mint contract. So what they did is we wanted to sell 500 NFTs. They minted half of them, sent them to my wallet so that I could sell them on OpenSea. And then they sold the other 250 directly on the Bitsky site. And if that sounds kind of odd, that's after months of trying to find other solutions and other workarounds and talking to other vendors. But basically, the fact that we're only dropping 500 is also what saved us, because what I ended up doing, those extra 250 that were sent to my MetaMask, is I set them all to go for sale at the same time on OpenSea, then like the day they were dropping. So you know what I mean? So it was like I had to go through.
You had to individually list,
exactly, which is doable for 250, but not doable for 5,000, right?
Yeah.
So that's where our small mint really saves us sometimes, is that if we're going to try and do something a little bit complex and we don't have the resources to do it at the higher level, let's say, inevitably we don't have that long of a list to go through, which then saved us when we got to sending out the t-shirts. It was like, get in the Discord, you have a week to fill out this form with your home address, and the t-shirt's on its way. And that's what it was.
And you knew that anybody who was in the Discord had the NFT already, and so there wasn't.
Yes, it was token gated.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We token gated it with Collabland, and that was also like literally that was a lot of people's first token gating experience. They they'd never done that, so it was a cool experience for them. Yeah.
In your FAQs, you have a picture with the Bitsky, like you go through, and people should check it out. In the drop, you've got this whole sort of explanation of how this is all going to work. It says you can no longer get the t-shirt anymore. And then there's pictures of like Bitsky and Collabland are going to interact, and this is what it's going to look like. This is perfectly normal. Don't worry about it. You can approve this. And I really appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't know what it is, where it's like confirm and you're like, I don't know. Yes.
Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, your other question too, Nicole, is to ask about, onboarding people to complex stuff, right? And I think even, you're saying January 2021 is a long time ago, and it's like, I think it's astonishing how far we've come even since the summer. So I can speak a little bit more to the experience of our holders. The name of our NFT is the First Mint Day One. Very appropriate, kind of basketball-ish kind of term. But people have been there since day one, again, to speak to kind of like our true fans and our true community members. And we call them the day ones. And basically, like, we came in there. It's like they all came in there and they were like, I've never had an Ethereum NFT until today. And then this one that I bought. So like, listen, LG, like, I don't know what I'm doing out here. And it was like 3 weeks later is when we were holding First Mint Fest to be like, listen, this is gonna be a 3-day, like super intensive, hilarious kind of party where then you learn some stuff and you get to, you showcase some great products out there, right? We had like Animoca Brands was there with like Sandbox and a bunch of their projects, Rev Racing, all this. So we had some big names, and that was really great because it helped people learn. See that some of those projects weren't just these like sketchy mints where people are getting rugged. It's like, no, don't worry. Like the Sandbox is a real company with like $100 million Series A. Like that's a real place. So it helped to disambiguate that. But also another key experience that I really believed in was giving people POAPs. Everybody knows POAPs now. In the summer, nobody knew what POAPs were. Not many people. And we had over 16,000 POAP claims during our festival. So we gave out POAPs during the streams, and a bunch of secret ones tried to collect them all. And even that was like, for a lot of people, it was the first time they're like, all right, I got to go get MetaMask. You got to type in the code on the POAP site and getting the token. But it was kind of like a risk-free exercise for them to get something like a POAP because they don't have to pay anything. They don't have to load MetaMask with any money or anything. Just go claim it. It's on XDAI, really easy. And that was such an easy, like such a simple onboarding experience for them. But then after that, a lot of people in our community, a lot of our day ones are like, okay, I kind of get what I'm doing here. Like, let's go mint some stuff, right? And then since then, I've minted tons of great projects. And I think that that's kind of like what we strive for at the First Mint. It's something I really believe in, taking on partner projects. Is I want projects where they're going to be big brands who are bringing in a lot of their fans to NFTs. And I want them to follow us because then they can discover other NFTs that are easily accessible, have easy price points, and then start their journey from there and hopefully go find a community that really speaks to them. So that's something that's like, it's like that, how we execute that mission changes every day because the space changes every day and people's behaviors and emotions change every day and sentiment. But overall, I think for First Mint, it's like, that's a place I always want us to be, is like, this is a great place to get started and to get your first experience or two, let's say.
Yeah. I love that. And it sounds like that sort of, TopShot to day one to then the Fest and the POAP was a easy, perhaps not easy, but like a sort of logical sequence for people to then understand, okay, I've got something in my MetaMask and here I go. And I love that each of those was experiential. You weren't necessarily teaching through, instructing, but rather teaching through sort of walking people through the experiences, which is, I think, is great.
Well, that kind of comes back to like what part of my fundamental belief of the space as well is that like I think crypto is the key to like a really fantastic positive online experience, right? And that scales to so many different levels. It's not just the experience which we're having now, which is like, NFT minting and collecting and connecting with people all over the world, which is really freaking awesome. But even over time, it's like, online experiences have been contentious. A lot of things we do online are troublesome or odd. And it's even something like banking took people years to figure to like be comfortable with. But I think one of the end games of crypto is to make our digital existence so much more of a pleasant and streamlined experience. And even if that starts at this very basic consumer level we're at now, where it's like, which hilarious JPEG did you mint that made you 10 grand? Or, which cool new TopShot sets do you want to get? Or which community do you want to join, or whatever that is? It's like, I think that's kind of the start, right? To what that'll be. And I think it's a huge part of our mission is to not only highlight those experiences, but also create them on our own. Right. So even something like First Mint Fest was then followed up by Flow Fest. So obviously we're close with Dapper Labs and the Flow team, and they were launching kind of their mainnet in October of 2021. And so, they asked to partner with us because they loved what we did at First Mint Fest, and they want us to do something a bit more extended because they're like, listen, we have like dozens of projects launching on Flow. Nobody really knows them. And we want you guys to help us kind of curate that experience. Right. So people still now, Flow Fest lasted a really long time. It lasted like 6 weeks, which is part of kind of like the joke of it. We kind of laugh about that now. Some say Flow Fest is still going. But it's one of those things where it's like, I was really honored and we had a really great time being like, okay, thousands of people are about to discover Flow projects, get their first wallets on Flow. How can we make that a safe and fun experience for them? Right. And that's kind of where I think we want to stay as we go.
Yeah, I love that idea of making our digital time more enjoyable and the experience more pleasurable. And that's something I feel a lot within Web3 personally. Let's see, I have two directions I want to touch on. I want to, learn a little bit more about what your community and circle of contributors looks like and what that evolution has. And then I want to dig in a little bit further. I'm curious sort of what your NFT membership model looks like today. But let's start with community because everything starts with community. So I'm curious, you mentioned Ashley, I believe, from your team, sort of
Ashley Carter,
core key troublemaker, and then conspirator.
Yeah, definitely troublemaker.
Who's been along from the beginning. And then I'm curious, how did you start to bring people in? You mentioned that you didn't get to have that sort of like the initial 10 first community members. It was like, 0 to 40,000. And so as you started to bring people in and engage with the community, both, just as community members, but bringing people in as contributors, what did that look like? And what does your team look like now?
For sure. So that's a really well worded question. How do we bring people in? So I, when it comes to building a team, I think having a community is really tremendous because you get to establish what your cultural fit is early, right? And you get your community to reflect it back to you, which is also something we get to do kind of in Web3 that wasn't really possible before. Because, we were able to kind of know what our community was like before we ever sold them anything at all. Right before we even made a dime, we had 6 months of like, hey, here's what our vibe, here's what people really dig about us, and here's what people reflect back to us, and how our people are starting to shape who we are as well. So when it came time to actually build a team, it was almost like, okay, well, who's passionate here, who has something to offer, and who's really keen to reach out and help out, right? So that's kind of how we started to build the team early on. And it's actually like a good piece of advice that I was given very early on is that to like literally at all, if you absolutely can, like pick directly from your community for culture fit, right? So that's kind of what we did early on. Ashley came on like almost since day one, mainly because from a structural standpoint, I knew, and from a brand standpoint, I really, it was a great opportunity for us to work together with matching skill sets, let's say. The next person after that was my brother, who is a lifelong like sports nut and sports gambler who at first, I told him about TopShot way before the moon, like way back in the September period. And he was like, I don't know about this, and just like ignored me, which was hilarious because he really missed out. And, but then he came on and wanted, and I asked him to start doing some of the shows with me because he had actually done a similar show. He used to do podcasts for NBA 2K, which NBA 2K, like the video game, has a competitive league, has an esports league. So he had done kind of like NBA digital podcast type stuff before. So he was a natural fit. And the way he and I fit together is very much like very, very similar to like on-air sports hosts, where like he's more the agitator and I'm more kind of like the straight shooter. So we kind of have like a very natural dynamic, and I think people love that we're brothers. And then after that came time to kind of like pull from the community, right? And people that we knew, that we didn't know. And we've gone through a few different contributors in the end, right? Like we had some people initially, we started writing a blog, but then we kind of gave that up because we didn't want to kind of play this like lifelong SEO race game of content that we did for 10 years. So we gave that up, but we had people contributing there. But, now I think right now we're actually in a hiring process right now where we're trying to hire up like a full content team. And it's been an interesting challenge because, 10 years of experience in content is a great asset. It's kind of who we're looking for, like people who can write great social media content and edit video and know how to build a campaign. Very important. But if they don't get it, you know what I mean? If they don't get the vibe of NFTs, like it's going to be tough. You know what I mean? It's like if you don't really understand what's making the community tick, that's hard. So it's kind of funny. It's like I tell people like 1 year of experience in NFTs to me is equivalent of 10 years of the actual hard skill that we need. Because I was like, the hard skill, we can teach that. You can go learn about that online. But understanding the community vibe and having it being like a person who gets it is like, it's hard to learn. It's hard to really teach that. So we're in a hiring process right now to kind of try and to scale, and it's been a fun experience. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, I think that a lot of communities are going through what you just described, where the very first team members were often people that were in that initial trusted circle, and then like the next wave came from the community of people emerging and presenting themselves and coming out of the woodwork. As we start scaling, we're looking at what feels like more traditional hiring models where you put something out and hope that some, new anonymous person is going to be a fit. But I think that as with traditional hiring, figuring out how to know if there's going to be a fit can be really, really tricky. So yeah.
It is challenging, and it's also something that I've never had to do. I've never run a startup and had to hire employee number 3, 4, 5 and kind of manage that, right? So it is new. I've always worked like within a team. And prior to this, I was working in production where it's like you hire somebody for 3 days. It's like, oh great, let's hire this grip.
It doesn't fit, it's okay.
Yeah, I've fired people on the spot and be like, go home, and just gone on the phone and call another camera assistant or something.
Yeah.
But it's like that was normal in the industry. Just just like that's production. But this is like, no, we have a startup, and like whoever we add now or have added, it's like they're going to be part of who we are as well, right?
Yeah.
And inevitably, I think, especially being in media and in this space, it's like I think like the base core capability we're looking for are people that are great communicators. And that not just hey, you can write cool tweets, but you can communicate with me and with our team and with our partners and with our community really well, and and you have that level of empathy that's needed to communicate clearly in the space, which can be the fine line, between creating a great community vibe and a great project and not. I find.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. There was a point, I don't know, within social media and tech where I saw us going sort of towards such short attention grabbing content that I assumed wrongly, very wrongly, that sort of the art of writing and of crafting messaging was going to be something that my children would never have to do, and that wasn't going to be something that was in demand. And it turns out now that, I think we're seeing like the ability to write well is like so incredibly in demand, which you would never think that such a traditional skill would be, such a hot commodity. But here we are.
Did you notice that they don't teach cursive in schools anymore? Like, is your kid going through that?
Oh yeah, definitely not. I mean, my daughter wanted to learn it, but
I mean, I'm not surprised totally, but I just found that out the other day, and I was like, wow, we're the last people who ever know how to write in cursive. Like, that's really
And what does that mean for signatures? I guess it'll just be a wallet,
Hey, I haven't done an actual signature in years, man. It's all digital anyways, and it's just like, it just makes you a signature, and I'm like, yeah, DocuSign, like that's fine.
Fine. No, I did some passport renewals, and I was like, what are we doing here? This is pretend.
Yeah. How do I do this again? Yeah. That's great.
So let's talk about NFTs some more, because, that's
Sure.
why we're here. I'm curious to understand a little bit more. So your day one drop was 500, as you mentioned. And and that was it. So that was the supply. Does that continue to be the supply of 500?
We have an extra 50 that we held for like early contributors, because we did have quite a few people who helped us early on. Either did some writing or some data crunching, or just kind of helped us get off the ground. So we reserved some for them. We reserved a few for giveaways. So I think out of those 50, we maybe have like 8 or 9 left that we'll use in the future in some way. But that's it. It's capped at that supply. There'll never be more day ones. We've joked about like day twos and stuff like that, but that would be part of a complete reinvention of who we are, I think, at this point, right? Like, I think we're pretty happy with the way we have our community, and it's still the price is still pretty accessible. I think it's, we sold those 500 for like 0.1 ETH at the time, which I think ETH was around 2,000 US. So we sold them for $200 US or for 0.1 ETH. So pretty accessible. And even now the price today is like 0.15. So people that like dig us and find us on Twitter and are like, hey, I like this vibe, and we're like, hey, we have a Discord, it's still really easy for them to get in and come hang out. So even in the last couple of months, we've had a few people who are like new community members finally buy the NFT, and they come in the Discord, and we have like a whole like welcoming committee in there of like people posting like wrestling gifs basically, or gifs. Like there's one guy who does like a Stone Cold Steve Austin impression. So every time a new person joins the Discord, we tag him, and he comes in and posts like gifs of like Stone Cold beating people up and stuff, and it's very it's really, we have a lot of fun like that. But that's also like small tight knit group is like, it just feels like we're a bunch of people hanging out. Literally last night, Nicole, we had like our First Mint happy hour, which we do like every month or two. It was like we all just get on voice chat and shoot the shit, and people in the community who have a project that they're working on get to like pitch it for a couple minutes. We do like a trivia. We mainly just joke around for like 2 hours, and it's great. So that's awesome. We have that kind of close-knit vibe right now. So in terms of expanding membership, it's like maybe in the future, but only if we were like significantly changing what the First Mint is. Like if we added a membership, I don't know if we would add it to what it currently is. I think it'd be like, no, we keep this nugget as it is, and we add a second membership that does this whole other thing, like a partner pass, or you get access to all these drops as part of our partners or some shit. That's not alpha. That's like literally, I'm just,
It's alpha
speaking
now.
like just, well, no, I don't know if I'd do that, but I'm saying it's like, it would be significantly different than what we have now. It wouldn't be, hey, sorry, like 500 First Mint people, like we're adding 10,000 more people tomorrow. It'd be like that would suck. So, and I wouldn't want to do that. So
that means your core community is capped at 550.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Which is, I mean, like, to be clear, that's a great number. Like, that's a great number for a community. It feels, I went to a college that had 250 students. So the whole community itself, like faculty, their kids, staff, was about 500 or less, and you knew everybody. And so it definitely falls within that sort of Dunbar's number sort of magic place. And so I guess that's what I was sort of curious about, was getting a sense of your feeling there. And so how much, are there ever questions of scaling or churn, and what does that look like as far as like growth for the community? Because there are some constraints to it.
Totally. Well, I'd say, like, what has been nice for me as a founder is to have sold a token or an NFT and to not have any expectations for floor price or utility or roadmap or anything like that. It was simple, really straightforward. Like, you get to come in the Discord and we're going to form a little community, and that's it. So it's like floor price. Like, I don't think about the floor price. Like, I don't care about that. And there's no expectation. And nobody DMs me being like, hey, when are you going to release like the First Mint like holder roadmap? And I'm just like, actually, no. Like, if you've been paying attention and you got it on to all the whitelists we gave you, you actually made back your investment like 10 times, just like, it's like we've already, and I've never even pronounced that. You know what I mean? I'm just like, no, like, you'll get benefits, but it's not going to be this big grandiose, like, congrats to all the holders. We're all the best. We all made all this money. It's like, no, just, you get to hang out, and projects that want to be part of our thing, you get access to them. And that's pretty decent. And it's not going to be every project, but it's going to be some of them. And that's nice. So I find it's really important for us to be able to build and have a community, but also manage the community's expectations. So that's been really helpful, is to not have that monkey on our back. So if ever we wanted to do some other NFT that has some other big utility and expectation, well, at least we have our core community that can, if anything, give us like realistic feedback on that too, right? Because now these are people that I now really trust to give me like super, like actual feedback, right? And not just to try and get alpha out of me. So what was your question? Now I'm just ranting about.
Well, it was about scale and churn and sort of any size constraints that the community feels. And I think you're getting at that, which is that it sounds like, and I guess I'd be curious of your opinion on this, that the community also feels like the size is the right size. Yeah,
I'm happy with the size. I think, again, scale wise, I would say right now we're still kind of in the first phase of what the First Mint is. We kind of started as this place to get information on Dapper projects, and we've expanded. People are learning, but it's like we're not at the point where it's like that we're about to significantly change. We're scaling in terms of making content. I want to make more content. I want to make more great content, more accessible stuff, make it easier for us to cover all these projects, easier to take on a bigger, greater, not that our partners are fantastic, but to do bigger projects with them, essentially, and to give ourselves some space to create, new experiences, more First Mint Fest, more cool stuff like that. And I think that then starting to do that will then lead us to what our next phase would be. But I think we're still in that. We're still very similar to what we were on day one, which is fine with me. I think in this industry, there's this like, everyone's like, get that VC money now before it's gone. And I'm just like, yeah, well, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like if we'd gone for a round of funding a year ago and with certain expectations, they'd be totally different than what they are now. Right. So, I'm happy to be able to have the space to build right now, to think really purposefully about that before we either go get money to do something bigger or expand our membership or whatever. It's like we've been able to see what this has become and what it is before then deciding, before deciding what it should be later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I recall often this conversation that Austin Roby with Ampled, actually we were in the cohort together, when we were looking at sort of what growth meant for Ampled, and he likened it to like that great neighborhood bar. And the great neighborhood bar is the great neighborhood bar. It doesn't have aspirations of being, the Cheesecake Factory or whatever, and franchising across. the country, but it does the neighborhood bar thing really well, and everybody's, who's there and part of it is grateful for that. And I think, that was his sort of like a thought about what growth could look like at Ampled. And we were, debating a lot of different options, but I think that, to your point, a sort of a meaningful growth is a great thing to see, and not worrying about, floor price and roadmap is super refreshing.
That's a great analogy too. Like the community bar. It's like, if we're the community bar right now, it's like, do we want to make the bar bigger, like buy the building next door and triple the size of the bar? Or do we want to keep that community bar, keep doing what we're doing, have a great time, and then be like, hey, I actually have this totally different idea. Let's go get some money and buy a building across town and build a baseball stadium. Right. And it's like, I think that's more how we would do things, like rather than just expand the bar that we have. It's like, no, actually, like we think we've done really good at creating this community bar, and we know what people love in sports. So we're going to go build our own stadium. It's like, I think that makes more sense for the kind of, the kind of organization that we're going to be.
Well, that actually gets at my last question for you, which is around community decisions and direction. So, knowing what you just said around sort of roadmap and scale, and that you're being very sort of community driven and thoughtful around it, I'm curious, as you think about making these decisions about partnerships or future directions, et cetera, how does First Mint work as far as community involvement in those decisions, and how have you built that?
Specifically for First Mint or with partners? A bit of both.
Well, with making decisions on behalf of First Mint, of like which partners to work with, or which directions to go in, or which other, topics or comics or anything like that to bring in.
That is tough. So there is, like, it sounds so strange to say this, because people that are coming from the traditional marketing world that we work with now, they don't quite understand this part. But inevitably, like, there is, like, I think a huge success of the NFTs and successful NFT people is that empathy. And I don't just mean empathy as in, like, thinking about how other people feel. I mean, like, being able to, like, take the temperature and be like, and literally just like read through thousands of tweets, go through all the discords, look at the sales charts and everything, and be like, what is the current vibe? Right? Like, what is that feeling right now? And vibe, yeah, exactly. Vibe is like overused, but like, vibes only today. Like, I get it, but like, GM, all that shit. But I don't mean that. I mean, like the actual little, like what is the sentiment at the time, right? A lot of projects get criticized for bad comms when they say something that's super fucking tone deaf. Right. And I worked in social media for years where brands would tweet shit that was so dumb. It was just like, no, like, don't say that. Like, God. And, people kept buying their products because their products are everyday things that people needed. But NFTs is like, nah, you're gone. One bad tweet, your project could freaking sink. So I think it's really important, no matter how big we grow, whatever podcasts I do or anything like that. I'm like, I always need to spend a certain amount of time every day and every week reading comments on Twitter, like just trying to see like what's that feeling right now. And that then helps inform being like, this partner, they want to work with us, they want to promote with us. They check all the boxes of it being a good NFT project, but like, I don't think people are going to take to this. I don't think it's going to work. And we say no, right? Whether it works or not, you know what I mean? So I think it's like, that's kind of, I think that's like one of the most important. I don't even know what that skill is. So I call it empathy, but I think that understanding that and not rushing decisions and launches based around that feeling is vital. And having somebody on your team or in your organization who is on the streets of on the NFT streets every day, knowing what that vibe is one of the most key hires you can ever make. There's I don't know if you read any Michael Lewis, who's the guy who wrote Moneyball and The Big Short.
Oh yeah, I just listened to an interview with him. Yeah.
So he's fantastic. His whole thing is finding experts right now. Like, he's all about finding who's the expert at what. And even Moneyball is like, he identified in the Oakland A's organization who the person was all the way down who actually understood the data that informed Billy Beane's decisions.
Yeah, I love that story.
so he has this concept about the sixth person down the rung is actually the expert, and how the expert, whether it's like disease, policy, NFTs, like baseball, whatever, that it's not, it's, you have the CEOs and the VPs and the managers and all that kind of stuff. But what you have to do is go to the building and go to the person who has like the ugly desk in the corner. But if that person takes a vacation, the company doesn't freaking function. That's who you need, because that's the person who understands. That's the actual person who understands, because they're at the bottom level, they're on the streets. And I think in NFTs that it's like it's literally an industry of that, of like who's the person on the streets who understands that vibe, and what do you, and are you leveraging that person's knowledge and their sentiment to do that. So I'm not saying that I'm that sixth person down the line. I'm just saying that it's like in general NFTs, managing community decisions, drops, partners, everything that we do, it's like, I think we just have to keep in, like, what we have to keep in mind the most is this, is just like, is this in the current right now? You know what I mean? Is this going to be super tone deaf, right? And just trying to stay there, and yeah. So that's kind of like part of I think what we try and do, and being a community voice, and influencer and all that kind of stuff is like, that's a huge part of it, is like reading the room, and really checking yourself to make sure that what you're going to say and you're going to put out there makes sense for people, and that it's going to be helpful to them.
Yeah. I mean, regardless of how DAOs and tokenized communities and NFT communities, et cetera, do governance, I think that, the ideal is that when you get to the snapshot, or when you get to that final, whatever that decision point is, you shouldn't have a ton of surprises. You should know where things are going. And I think that reading the room and being on the ground is so central to that. Well, this has been super fun. I really appreciate the chance to just catch up and learn more about where you've been and gone since the year plus since we first met. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I think maybe we shared this at the top, but I would love for you to just share before we go where people can find you on the interwebs.
Oh yeah, we didn't do that at the top. Probably the best way to keep up with us is on Twitter, TheFirstMint. That's it. Pretty simple, spelled the way you'd think, one word. And we're kind of in a bit of a transitionary period right now in terms of kind of changing up some of our content. So if you kind of flip through our podcast catalog, there's almost, I think, like 170, 180 episodes there, because we do quite a bit of content. There's some really great interviews in there. Some of those are like live shows from, like, we just record Twitter Spaces. It was a great Twitter Spaces. We wanted to put it out there. But there's some real gems in there with some really fantastic people. So you can flip through those. But in the next little bit, we're going to be kind of changing up our content to be a bit more of an evergreen podcast, and something that people want to tune into every week, despite what's happening in NFTs.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. And we'll see you online.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay.